I want to talk about mindfulness, which is what we do here in the Insight tradition, is this practice of mindfulness, is the meditation that we practice, Vipassana, insight meditation, one of the basic teachings of the Buddha. And really, it's the direct path to realization. That's the subtitle of Bhikkhu Analayo's book, Satipatthana, The Direct Path to Realization. So it's the instructions to freedom, to liberation. And even though it's very familiar and we do it much of the time when we sit, in fact, it's so common that it's often the practice that's used in secular mindfulness is this breath and body awareness and this settling, but it's incredibly important, and it's and I think it's helpful to revisit the teaching on a regular basis. Even though I've been doing this for a number of years, I find it helpful to look again at the different the four foundations of mindfulness, or the four establishments of mindfulness. Sati is the word in Pali that means mindfulness, and I that's what I wanted to talk about this week. And then this morning, I went to a group that meets monthly in Los Angeles. It's been going for many years. It meets the first Sunday of the month. It's BIPOC and Allies as part of Meditation Coalition. And we talk about, it's a Dharma group, but it talks about things that are happening in the world and the impact it has on people, and how practice supports moving through the world and the reality of our days, of our times. And this morning there was a couple, um, a married couple, two men, a biracial couple. And I've known them for also maybe 10 or 12 years, and they've been married probably for 10 years. And they were talking about the impact that this white supremacist culture has on their relationship as a man of color. He's a Southeast Asian and a white man, and the impact that even in this very intimate of relationships has permeated it, because it's the systemic conditioning that we all we all experience, and how it even comes into these very intimate relationships. And so, um, when James was talking about the impact and how he was, starting to he talked about how important the Dharma was, how important this meditation practice was to help him see what was happening, to help him see his conditioning, and to help begin to dissolve it. And then his husband, as a white man, was talking about the same thing. We don't see the water we swim in until we stop and begin to recognize where we may have this discomfort, where we may be uncomfortable. And I was talking to James after, and we were talking about how we work on this stuff for years and years and years, but it's because the roots are so deep. It's going to take years and years and years, which is why it's so important to keep the focus on this mindfulness, this insight, this willingness to turn towards what might be uncomfortable, to turn towards things that we may not want to look like, that we've been conditioned to bypass, to turn away from. And so it's with that it was almost like a doubling down this morning as I was reflecting on it, is like, yeah, this stuff that we do when we come and we sit and we practice is life changing. If we're willing, and I mentioned before, willingness, if we're willing to make the effort and to just be where we are and to sit with what's going on. So I want to kind of go through the Satipatthana, to go through the foundations of mindfulness, the establishments of mindfulness. And the other day as I was thinking about this the other day, it was in a class with Lama Rod Owens. It was a Zoom class. Some of you may know him. He's a wonderful teacher. And he was kind of talking about this thing. And he asked two questions. And he asked, the first questions was, what do we do to ensure we're present in the moment? And the second question was, how do we ensure how do we ensure we respond wisely in the moment? And for me, the answer is this practice, this willingness to be present, sati. Sati, which is translated usually as mindfulness, is what is a meaning of it. It also means to be with. How can we be with not what we think we want, not what the stories we have, but how can we be with the experience of this moment? And it's incredibly important. And this incredibly logical path that the Buddha has offered us as this tremendous teaching. It's part of the Eightfold Path, but it's really the without mindfulness, it's almost impossible to do anything else because we're not paying attention. We're not being with, we're somewhere in our head. And so, which is where we spend so much of our time. And I also found this the other day. I got this thing from a workshop I did, I don't know how many years ago, and the author is unknown, but I want to read it because without mindfulness, this is kind of where we hang out, and it's called change. And it says, if you always think what you've always thought, then you will always feel what you've always felt. Then you will always do what you've always done. If you always do what you've always done, then you will always get what you've always gotten. If you always get what you've always gotten, then you will always think what you've always thought. And it's like this circle that we're in. It's this circle that we constantly go around in. And if you think about it, and I invite you to think about this in your own lives, it's that story that just never goes away. It's that deep conditioning, whether our familial conditioning, our societal conditioning, whatever it is, it's this story of we were talking this morning about being nice, always being nice. It's like being nice. That's kind of a deep part of my conditioning. It's also a part of a lot of white women are conditioned to be nice. There's a book called White Women. And there's a documentary called Deconstructing Karen, where they talk about this aspect of white women being nice and how dangerous that can be without speaking up and saying things that need to be said. But anyway, so if we don't pay attention to what we're doing, what we're thinking, the thoughts that go through our head, we're going to keep doing the same stuff. Nothing, the saying nothing changes if nothing changes. So this practice of mindfulness is this invitation to change, this invitation to look deeply at what's going on. And sati, mindfulness, begins to ground us and take us away from that autopilot that we run on. When we let autopilot run, something happens, something unpleasant is said to us, or we have an unpleasant experience, or we don't get what we want, or somebody doesn't return our phone call. It's like, ugh, they don't like me. I'm not good enough. What did I do wrong? All these stories, and we have our own. Those are kind of my go-tos. We all have our own go-tos, and they can be really painful. And oftentimes we go, oh, why are you thinking this? And then we let that second arrow, we have the discomfort, and then we lay the second arrow on it. We judge ourselves or whatever it is. And so mindfulness invites us to say, we're going to do something different. And what we're going to do is begin to move towards clarity. And this practice, satipatthana, the foundations of mindfulness, create the conditions that allow for the arising of wisdom, allows for the arising of clarity, cleaning the dust out of our eyes, seeing reality as it is, and ending suffering. Whereas I have this quote from the Mindfulness in Plain English. If I can find it, I'll find it at some point. But it's like this invitation to be, this sati is an invitation to be with reality rather than what we think reality is, because they're not necessarily in the same room. So the first foundation, which you are all familiar with, is the breath and body foundation. This reconnection with this fathom-long body. The Buddha said our awakening can be found in this fathom-long body. We're so disconnected in our society from our bodies. We are moving towards this intellectual, I think I've probably mentioned it before, my theory of why aliens look the way they do with these ginormous heads and these skinny little bodies is because we're focused so much on the brain and the intellect, and we're totally ignoring what goes on from the neck down. But there's so much wisdom in the body. That's where the trauma is stored. That's where, generations of experience, generations of wisdom is. So we have to relearn to connect with it again. So the first foundation is breath and body. Out of the head, which is full of mental constructs, and we begin to calm the body, we begin to relax the body, we begin to know what our bodies feel like. We begin to recognize the sensations in the body. It's an anchor, and it's the breath in the body, it's the body, and as best we can, we begin to connect with it. A lot of times there's a body scanning meditation, which can be really helpful for this. When I was really first getting into the body, I had to listen to a body scanning meditation every day because I was like kind of clueless. I would have sensations in my body, but I would ignore them. I was really good at ignoring them. I ingested a lot of alcohol in my time to help me ignore that, and I ingested a lot of food in my time to help me ignore that. But to begin to become familiar with my body. And we live in a society that tells us only certain bodies are okay, and we have to strive for that. And that's a load of crap. And so to relearn to just be at ease with our own body. I feel like I'm giving book things you should read. The Body is Not an Apology by Sonia Renee Taylor is an excellent book about, reconnection and relearning to love the body. Whatever it is, again, sati, be with what's here. Be with what our experience is. And so when we begin to sit with this physical experience, we begin to notice sensations. Notice pleasant, notice unpleasant. And that takes us into the second foundation, which is Vedana, which is feeling tone. So we're anchored in the body. We're open to the full experience of what's right here, dropping out of the story, dropping out of the head, beginning to calm the body, steady the body, and then we're open to the full experience. Some things we begin to notice may be pleasant. Oh, it feels good to sit here, or there's a sound that's pleasant, or a physical sensation that's pleasant. Most often, though, we recognize what things are unpleasant. So this is Vedana, recognizing when things are pleasant and unpleasant. And this is incredibly important because this drives so much of our reactivity. If something is pleasant, we tend to grasp towards more. I want more, I want more, I want more. If something's unpleasant, push, 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 push. We don't want it. This goes back to, primordial, if there's danger that's unpleasant, we have to be on the lookout for that, push it away, get away, run. Pleasant, that's going to, help us live, help us survive. But this is, sometimes it gets too much. And so we have to be willing to recognize and sit with the unpleasant. Sit with the noise. Sit with the itch that we don't scratch. I mean, it's not about being so stoic and like, I will never succumb, but instead it's about recognizing the tendency to react, to particular things, like particular music or particular voices. I had a relationship where the person left me for someone from Boston with red hair. So for a really long time, I had problems with red-headed people with Boston accents because it triggered this pain in my gut. It was totally irrational, but that was my, aversion, unpleasant aversion, push it away. Or something good happens. It's like, I want more. So how can we be cognizant of this? This pause, this steadiness of the body, and then the recognition. And we begin to see this. We have the power when we pause to choose and respond wisely. I'm not going to start yelling at this poor person with red hair who's from Boston. I'm just going to treat them. I'm going to recognize what's happening. Ooh, this is unpleasant, but I don't have to take it personally. Mindfulness breaks us out of this reactivity, begins to break us out of this conditioning. And when we're really paying attention, we can see the impermanence of the feeling tone. Sometimes pleasant turns to unpleasant. Sometimes unpleasant turns to pleasant. You know, the other night I was eating an ice cream and it was yummy till the brain freeze started. And it's like, is it the ice cream that's evil? All of a sudden it used to be good, now it's bad. No, it's my reaction to it. So we begin to not demonize the things that are unpleasant and, canonize the things that are pleasant. Instead, we have this recognition. And then there's also neutral, which we oftentimes miss totally. Because sometimes it feels like boredom. We'd rather have unpleasant than nothing at all. So to recognize, right now there's just calm. Not pleasant, not unpleasant. So there's a power in this pause. There's a power in this recognition of pleasant and unpleasant, and an impersonal quality to it, which then kind of supports us as we move into the third foundation, which is recognition of the moods of the mind, recognition of things that are arising, reactivity, perhaps, recognizing when there's happiness, recognizing when there's crankiness or sadness or joy or anger, jealousy, conceit, all these things. The Buddha talks about know a mind with anger, know a mind without anger, know a mind that's contracted, not contracted, distracted, not distracted. But those are just a few examples. It's really the whole range of emotions that arise. And so to just recognize what's present. Again, there's the steadiness of the foundation of breath and body. There's the openness to is this pleasant? Is this unpleasant? And then there's the quality of recognition of what is this? This is anger. Maybe there's a tightening in the gut or a tightness in the chest or the jaw or the fists or something. Ooh, that's what anger feels like. There's recognizing what joy is. Oh, that's a warmth coming over the body. Oh, okay. So we become familiar. Instead of being dragged around by these things and reacting, there's a clarity that we now have. And again, there's an impersonal quality to this. Instead of saying, I am, we say that this is arising. Instead of I am angry, which is we then take birth as an angry person, we just say, I'm experiencing anger. So there's a different perspective with that, a different way to relate to the emotions that are showing up. We don't have to identify with the moods. There's an honest acknowledgement of the emotions without shame and judgment. Because again, because of our conditioning, our societal conditioning, our familial conditioning, we've been told some things are okay, some emotions are okay, some emotions are not okay. And a lot of times we get that from our family. You're not allowed to feel anger. Or particular people in the society are not allowed to feel anger. Or you're not allowed to feel this, or you're not allowed to feel that. Or you're allowed to feel it, but you're only allowed to feel it for 3 days. I remember when I was in chaplaincy training years ago, someone came in to talk to us and asked us to reflect on how we handled grief in our family. What were you allowed to grieve? Were there certain forms of grief that were okay and others that were not okay? Was there a time limit on your grief? And when you begin to ask those questions, you begin to look at how your responses or how you view things and go, wait a minute, this has been proscribed. Again, we are putting ourselves in these little boxes by what we hear, what we're taught, what we're told, what we read, what we learn, which may not be true or valid. And instead, we have to honor the reality of this moment. Sometimes things are uncomfortable and we don't want to feel them. That spiritual bypass. How can I ohm my way out of this? I can meditate a lot more and, stuff down feelings. This foundation has said, meet this thing, meet this feeling, meet this emotion with friendliness, not shame, not judgment. You can't help what's present. There are these seeds of consciousness. Thich Nhat Hanh talks about them in this one school of Buddhism. There are these seeds of consciousness, these things that are planted because of our experiences, our conditioning, and when conditions are right, they arise. We can't help it. I never get up in the morning and say, I want to feel jealous. I want to feel less than because, it's so rewarding. It just arises because of circumstances. So we have to recognize that. And when you recognize the emotion, there can be a settling of the emotion so you can respond from a place of peace, a place of ease, a place of wisdom. And again, we always have to pay attention. We don't just get it and it's done. It's like, I'm done with jealousy. I'm done with this. It's like James and I were talking this morning. It's work of years and years and years because these things, we can't tell when they're going to show up. It depends on causes and conditions. And it's like, okay, this is what's here. It's unpleasant, but I don't berate myself for the feeling. It's how I work with it. Karma is action. Karma is how we deal with this moment. How do we relate? How do we work with what's right here? Mindfulness offers a way to relate to this moment and work with what's showing up with wisdom, with compassion, especially if it's challenging. And it teaches, and with joy. Sometimes we have difficulty with pleasant emotions. Some of us do because you're not supposed to feel that in this situation. You can't help it. I'm really happy to see there's a huge push for joy right now. Joy is really important. It's not something that we put away and work towards somewhere else. It's like if it's here, be with the joy that's here right now. Really important. And then this fourth foundation, in the sutta, it talks about the aggregates. It talks about be aware of the dhammas, the aggregates, the foundations of mindfulness, the hindrances, the Four Noble Truths, and the 7 factors of awakening. But I love the teaching of Bhikkhu Analayo, who's this very wise monk, and he talks about, and some of the nuns like Aya Ananda Bodhi and Aya Santachita, who live in Northern California, have talked about really the fourth foundation is understanding the habits of the mind and the mental states and recognizing what takes you away from liberation and what takes you towards liberation. So Bhikkhu Analayo likes to talk about just looking at the hindrances and looking at the factors of awakening. So to to recognize when these are present or when they're absent. Recognizing the hindrances when you're caught in craving, whatever it is. Oh man, I want that job. Oh man, I want that ice cream. Or caught in aversion. I hate that. I don't want this. I don't want this to happen. Those types of things. How, whatever form they take, really when we look at it, it's not necessarily so blatant, but a discomfort with just, the way it is, this discomfort of being in our own skin. Dukkha, not happy with the way things are. Aversion to the present moment. When you're impatient, that's aversion to the way things are. So really beginning to see the subtle nuances of how these things show up. The other hindrances are restlessness and worry, dullness, checking out, torpor, kind of avoidance, numbing out, and then doubt. I was talking to someone the other day who's been through all these experiences, and she was doubting the teachings, doubting the Dharma, and that's a hindrance. So recognizing that that's a hindrance. And I was also had my teeth cleaned on Tuesday, and I was listening to the dental hygienist, and I were chatting before she started, and she was talking about going to Mexico to see her meet her partner's parents, but she was worried about her dog and would he be okay when she was gone, and and so she was full of fear around that. And then we were talking about hiking, and I said, yeah, I like to hike. I do go hiking alone. And she's like, oh, I'm so afraid. I might fall down and blah, 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 blah. And then listening to her when I was thinking, oh my God, there's so much fear. There's so much worry. It's a life that's built on this place of worry. And we may not even realize it because it's like, oh, well, I might fall down, or the dog may not be happy if I'm gone because he's so attached to me. They can be simple things, but they still gnaw at us. And because you're so grounded in your body now, and because you're aware of the unpleasant and pleasant experiences and sensations, you can pause and say, what's going on? Oh, there's some worry about this. There's some fear about this. That can be, you can name it, you can call it a hindrance. And instead of taking birth as a person who's so fearful about something, or who doesn't like something, or thinks this needs to be gone now, we can just recognize that aversion, that hindrance of aversion that makes it so uncomfortable to be in your skin. And just say, okay, can I let go of that? So to recognize the hindrances, because that's what gets in the way of liberation. And then to begin to recognize the factors of awakening. And the 7 factors of awakening, the first one is mindfulness. Because if you're not paying attention, you can't get here. So really grounding, being present. What is this moment? What is this experience? The next is investigation, curiosity, asking that question, like Suzuki Roshi talks about in Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. What is this? Letting go of preconceived ideas and saying, what is this? Oh, is that an old story? Is that fear again in a different outfit, so I didn't recognize it? And then effort to come back again and again, because it's so easy to get drawn into these things. That's how we operate as human beings. It's helpful, but to be willing to come back. And then when you can, recognize, let go, be fully present with the moment, even if it's unpleasant. There's no preference. That's one of my favorite definitions of equanimity. An intimacy with the present, an intimacy with our experience without preference. Once you can come into that place of no preference, there's a spaciousness that arises because you're not clutching onto a particular point of view or preconceived idea. There's a spaciousness that opens up, which allows for a joy, just a being open, and a tranquility. I invited that in the meditation. Can you touch in that stillness when you're not pushing or pulling or moving to the future or the past? Just being right here. And I was talking to a friend of mine, texting with a friend of mine who's sitting with a woman he's known. I think she's in her 90s and she's probably going to pass in the next couple of days. And he said, just sitting with her in the present moment, there was this feeling of ease and tranquility. Even though there's grief, even though there's sadness, there can be this place of ease if we're willing to let go of shoulds and coulds and if onlys and what ifs. There's a joy, a tranquility, and there's a collectedness of mind because we're present. We're not multitasking in our brain. And the last piece, the last factor of the 7 factors of awakening is equanimity, that place of no preference. So recognizing that, recognizing what it feels like to have joy, recognizing what it feels like to have some tranquility, of not being in the future or the present. I remember distinctly having those moments. The Buddha talks about that too, remembering on the night of his awakening, or before he sat down to awaken, when he was a kid, watching his father and just sitting to the side and just having this sense of being fully in the moment, going, that's it. And so this mindfulness is this path to realization, is this path to freedom and liberation from pushing, pulling, this, that. But it takes effort. It takes willingness. It can be complex. It takes time. We who want the microwave miracle have to get used to this taking time. I didn't get here overnight. This conditioning, again, sometimes is generational, that I'm working with, that we're working with. So can we just be patient and do it with this moment where we are right now? And what happens is we begin to live life with a spaciousness, an open-heartedness, a wisdom, a clarity, a compassion. Doesn't mean things get all la 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 la. Shit still happens. There's still incredible injustice in this world. It's ramping up right now. We know that. We see it in our society. It's crazy out there. Doesn't mean that we don't work to end suffering. I was very lucky to have sat with Bhikkhu Bodhi last month. He was actually at Dhamma. He was out at Mahapajapati in near Pioneer Town. Some of you may know who Bhikkhu Bodhi is. He's a monk who's translated many, many, many of the suttas, and he's great. But he talks about how this is a practice not only of our own liberation, but but we work for the benefit of all beings, and it's a call to Buddhists in this generation to end injustice, to end suffering where we see it. So it's not about sitting back and just staring at our navel and working towards our own enlightenment, but it's about seeing where things are not working, seeing where there's harm being caused, because we have a clarity now, we have a wisdom, and we have a compassion. And we have an equanimity, so we walk in balance. We have an appropriate response. We can wear the world as a loose garment while we also work towards changing it where it needs to be changed. So we don't keep going thinking those thoughts that we've always thought and doing those things that we've always done. So thank you, my friends. I invite you to spend some time with mindfulness, spend some time reflecting in your lives with your practice. What is important, what's coming up for you, where your practice is. Start where you are. That's the only place you can start. Start right where you are, and keep it simple and keep it kind, keep it gentle. And I wish you much luck, and I wish you much ease. So thank you, my friends. And now we have some time if there's any questions or comments or thoughts, clarifications, rebuttals. Happy to hear. Okay, well, you know what? Let's just sit for a couple of minutes and let just just sit with this first foundation, maybe the second, and just take a couple of breaths. Just relax your body and your mind as much as you can, and really connect with what may be present for you right now. What sensations may be in the body. See if you can touch into a gentleness, a softening. Maybe touching into a compassionate heart, a loving heart. The Buddha invited us to sit with a mind and a heart imbued with loving kindness and compassion, joy and equanimity. And remembering that we don't just practice for our own benefit, but we practice for the benefit of all beings. May all beings be happy. May all beings find ease and joy. May all beings be free. Thank you, my friends. It's so lovely to sit with you. It's always such a delight. And maybe I'll see some of you in a couple of weeks on the 17th. I'm really looking forward to being in community with y'all. So that's it. Any last parting shots? So I want to reiterate Adrian's invitation to volunteer if you're so called. That's a form of Dharma, or offer some financial support to ICD. And I think the link is in the chat somewhere. That helps support our community to keep moving forward and see where we go. And so thank you for your support. Thank you for your kind attention. Thanks for being here, and much love, my friends. And I will see you next time.